Hey, how you doing? We're going to go through the basic information for cutting and stripping fabric. We'll start with basic information. We'll start with our fabric. Obviously, you bought it by the yard. These are salvages. These are the factory edges, factory cut edges or salvages, and then this is your cut edge. So we're going to be concentrating on this cut edge, straightening it up and cutting strips so that they're nice and straight strips. The tools that we will be using are rotary cutters, gridded ruler, and a gridded mat. There's two types of rotary cutters. They're like rolling razor blades, so you have to be careful. So then there's the safety factor. So there's the guard. You open the guard and you roll it along the side of the ruler, and that cuts your fabric. This is a nicer one because just as you grip it, it exposes the blade and you release it and it goes. This one you always have to make sure and close it when you set it down. This is our gridded ruler. It's all 1-inch grids with 1/4 inch in between, and it's identical to the gridded mat. Again, 1-inch grids and all the measurements in between. First of all, we're going to start with folding our fabric. It's important to fold the fabric so that it's parallel from the salvages to the fold. If not, you will get crooked cuts. So you start by taking the two salvages, the factory edges, and lining them up. And they have to be lined up evenly. If they're lined up crooked, you're going to get ripples in your fabric. That will cause its own problems when you cut. So you want to make sure and line up those edges until there's no ripples. And once you've done that, you kind of fold it down with your hands, and then you take it and you fold it yet a second time. So here's your two salvages, here's your first fold, and you're folding your two salvages to your first fold. And again, I'm hoping you guys can see that. I'm trying to get rid of that little ripple there, and then I'm lining up so that that's evenly all the way across. Lay it down and smooth it out again, feeling for any folds that might be under there. First thing we're going to do is square off the end. The important things to pay attention to here are these lines on this grid and our folds. If we folded this correctly, these should be parallel to these lines on the grid. So I'm going to line up this top edge, which also should line up the bottom edge on this grid. And then I'm going to find my shortest piece of fabric. As you can tell, this where we cut it at the store, it's not even. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to find this shortest piece, which is right here, and then I'm going to take my gridded ruler and line up my grids. So the grids on the mat are identical to the grids on the ruler. And what I've done now is I have the littlest edge here ready to cut off. I'm going to use the manual. So I open my cover, I kind of get my hand behind so it's all one length, and I keep the tip of the blade down. I don't want to go like that because then it starts trying to cut with this and it doesn't work. So now, then my left hand is going to be holding my ruler. If I'm just on the ruler, when I'm holding it down, it will slide. So the best thing to do, again, I got to line it up now. Put part of your palm on the ruler, part of it on the mat, and part of it on your fabric. And that'll stop you from sliding when you push into it to hold it still. You're going to kind of bear into the ruler with the cutter, and of course we want our hands far away from this. We do not want our hands anywhere near where we might slide. Again, those safety, these are like rolling razor blades. So I'm securing this so that I don't slide here. I'm securing this, so I'm using the tip of the blade, and I'm just going to roll that, and that's going to square off that end. So the next thing I need to do is cut my strips. For this fabric, our strips are going to, my strips on this fabric are going to be 2.5 inches wide. So I'm going to go 1, 2.5 inches over. Each grid is 1 inch. I'm going to line that up. on the 1/2 inch. So my 1/2 inch line on my ruler is going to be on the solid line on the mat because I'm doing the 1/2 inch intervals. Again, I'm making sure that the things I'm looking at is I'm making sure my fabric is parallel, and of course, by the way, I closed that. My fabric is parallel here, it's parallel to the mat, because the mat is my base for everything. So I'm making sure that my fabric is still lined up. And if for some reason this edge got crooked, you just re-square it off. Like let's say it was crooked, you line it back up, scoot it over one of those lines, and I would just trim off the crooked edge again. So that can sometimes happen as we're moving along, things slide. You just trim off that little end and start again. So again, I'm going to go over 1, 2 1/2. And that is because that's the size of strips I'm cutting. On this particular project, I'm going to cut 9 of these. So I'm going to go 2 1/2. There's my strip. And I'm going to go 2 1/2 again. And like I said, again, this is for this particular fabric. My other fabric, I have to cut 5 1/2, but that's my yellow fabric. So I would do this for this particular fabric 9 times at 2 1/2 inches. And then the same thing with the next fabric, but the other, you cut it larger, 5 1/2 inches. So what we learned is squaring off, just cutting those uneven edges, and then stripping, which is cutting this nice even edge. So now I'm going to show you some of the things to be careful of. When you're lining up your salvages, if you don't line them up correctly, and then, so if I kind of do it like hastily, and these need to be ironed because otherwise I'm having a hard time. So if I do this, line this up, and let's say that I'm not lined up on this, I'm going to be a little exaggerative so you guys can see it, but you can see how it's a little bit higher, a little bit lower. Let me show you what can happen. I'll line up my ruler, so my ruler's lined up, but my fabric is not. I squared it off. There's my 2 1/2 inches. Again, the mistakes I'm making is this is not parallel with my mat. So now what happens is I end up with a nice zigzag piece of fabric. So that's the importance of lining it up on the mat and making the ruler also line up on the mat. Hope that's helpful. We'll see you at class. Bye. Hi, there's one other little thing I wanted to mention when we're cutting these long, wider strips. When we open this up, we have a tendency to want, as we move along and we stretch to cut that longer strip, we have a tendency to go flat with our cutter. So it's really important that when we're cutting, we make sure and keep that blade tip consistent, as opposed to as we reach, rolling it flat. Because what happens then is this hits the ruler and we skip little spots and our blade won't cut through everything, and then we have to use scissors and it's not fun. The other thing that'll happen is these do get dull. So if we're finding that there's a dull spot on it, we do need to change the blade, so come and see us if you do.